He never wanted a mail-order bride until he saw her step off the train crying alone at a dusty station, and in that moment his heart and his life changed forever. The morning air was crisp and cold. As the rugged rancher walked along the train station platform, his boots crunching against the gravel and the faint whistle of a distant train echoing across the tracks, he had always preferred solitude and found no desire for marriage, especially not the thought of a mail-order bride. His mind focused on routine matters of the ranch and the business he had to attend to. Yet, as he turned a corner, his eyes caught sight of a young woman stepping off the train. Her small trunk clutched tightly in her hands, her shoulders tense and her posture uncertain. She paused for a moment as if trying to gather courage or measure the distance to the station exit. The tears on her cheeks glistened in the pale morning sunlight, and she looked around nervously. The bustling crowd moved past her with little notice, some casting quick, curious glances, but no one offered assistance. She looked so small and vulnerable amidst the noise and motion of travelers and the clatter of the station that he felt an unfamiliar tug of concern in his chest. He watched her hesitate as she took a few careful steps forward, her skirts brushing against the dust of the platform and her fingers tightening on the handle of her trunk. He noticed the way her lips trembled slightly and how she blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold back more tears. The sight of someone so clearly in need of help stirred something in him, a mix of protectiveness and curiosity he had never anticipated. Seeing anyone like this arrive in his town, at first he thought she might be lost or perhaps abandoned. Yet the more he watched, the more he realized that she carried with her a quiet dignity. Even in her distress, the rancher felt a subtle shift. Within himself, a recognition that this moment might change something about the day, or perhaps about his life entirely. He studied her carefully, noting the way her hair fell across her face, the soft set of her shoulders, and the tentative way she moved as she tried to navigate the crowd without drawing attention to herself. She seemed fragile and strong at the same time, and he found his mind wandering to questions about her past, about the journey she had endured to arrive here, about the courage it had taken to leave everything behind and face an unknown future. She stepped closer to the edge of the platform, glancing around as if searching for someone familiar, a small hitch in her step betraying exhaustion or uncertainty. He realized that this woman had come into the world he knew carrying not just a trunk, but the weight of fear, hope, and expectation. He felt an impulse to approach her to offer guidance or protection. Yet he hesitated briefly, aware that he had never intended to involve himself in someone else's affairs. The train station seemed quieter somehow, as he lingered watching her, the morning light catching the tear streaks on her cheeks and the soft rustle of her clothing in the wind. The distant sounds of the town faded into the background, and for a moment it was only them, the rancher, and this young woman who had stepped off a train crying. And the idea that he might play a part in the next chapter of her life filled him with an unfamiliar anticipation and a quiet sense of possibility. The young woman stayed on the platform, clutching her small trunk, her hands trembling slightly and her chest rising and falling with the effort to steady her breathing. The bustling station seemed overwhelming. Noise of voices, footsteps, and the distant clatter of trains pressed around her. Yet no one came to offer assistance. She shifted her weight from foot to foot, her skirts brushing against the gravel and the wind tugging at her shawl as she tried to preserve what little warmth she had. The tears on her cheeks had dried into faint streaks, but the ache in her heart and the anxiety in her stomach had not lessening. With each passing moment, she felt more isolated and uncertain of what to do next. Each train whistle or distant voice made her pulse jump and her eyes dart toward the source, hoping for help or for someone familiar to appear. Yet the station remained indifferent. Her trunk felt heavier with every second, and the thought of being alone in an unfamiliar town deepened the ache of fear and abandonment. She tried to calm herself, breathing slowly and shifting on the rough wooden crate she had chosen to sit on. Her mind raced with questions about where she would stay and what she would do next. The weight of her journey pressed down on her. A journey filled with long miles over plains and hills, leaving behind family letters and dreams of a new life. In this place, the chill of the morning seemed to seep through her. Thin clothing and her heart ached with the reminder that she was utterly alone. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination remained. She had endured long journeys before and faced strangers in unknown towns, and she drew on that resilience now, willing herself to remain alert and patient. Her gaze swept the horizon, searching for any sign of someone approaching, someone who could offer help or guidance. Her ears caught a faint sound in the distance, the rhythmic clop of hooves echoing across. The empty streets, her heart leapt and sank, at the same time a swirl of hope and uncertainty twisting in her chest. She strained to see who it might be and whether this figure was friend or stranger. The wind whipped across the platform, tugging. At her shawl and brushing hair across her face, she pushed it aside, her pulse quickening as the sound grew nearer, every sense alert as she tried to prepare herself for what was coming, yet unsure if relief or disappointment awaited her. She hugged, her trunk tighter and sat straighter, willing herself to stay calm and composed. The minutes stretched, and the shadows lengthened, the chill of the morning pressing in, and yet the distant sound of hooves offered a fragile promise of change. Something she had been waiting for without knowing it. Her eyes fixed on the horizon, and a quiet sense of anticipation settled over her, even as the fear and loneliness clung to her, the possibility that her journey was about to shift, and that someone had come for her filled her with a tentative hope that warmed her heart amidst the cold and isolation. The sound of hooves grew louder, and her heart began to race. The figure on horseback became clearer as he rode steadily toward the station. A rugged cowboy with a calm, determined expression that seemed to promise safety and strength. She clutched her small trunk tighter and rose from the crate, unsure whether to feel relief or lingering fear. The wind tugged at her shawl and whipped strands of hair across her face, and she brushed them away, trying to steady herself as he dismounted with practiced ease. The cowboy approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. The morning light glinting off his hat and the soft dust rising around him made the moment feel almost suspended. In time, he stopped a few feet away, tipping his hat slightly and introducing himself, his voice steady and warm, explaining why he had come. A promise kept to honor, a connection with her family, or a mutual acquaintance reassured her that she was no longer alone. She exhaled shakily, feeling the tension she had carried all morning begin to ease, and a flicker of hope spark within her. The cowboy extended a hand toward her or gestured for her to join him on his horse. She hesitated briefly, weighing trust and fear, but the reassurance in his eyes and the gentleness of his movements encouraged her to take a step forward. Each motion she made toward him felt like leaving behind the weight of abandonment and uncertainty. She stepped closer, feeling the solid presence of someone who could protect her and offer guidance. The distant noises of the station faded as he helped her with her trunk and prepared the horse for the journey ahead. The air seemed lighter, the sun warmer, and a quiet connection began to form between them, a bridge over the isolation that had pressed so heavily upon her. The first moments of trust and companionship settled gently as they mounted the horse together, the rhythmic motion of riding along the dusty road blending with the calm of his presence, and the soft sounds of the surrounding town fading behind them. She felt the stirrings of relief, courage, and hope. A new chapter quietly beginning under the open sky, the stars beginning to emerge above them, and the distant promise of shelter, warmth, and safety awaiting at the ranch where her journey would continue into trust and possibility. The ride from the station carried them through quiet fields dusted with frost, the cold air biting at her cheeks, but the warmth of the cowboy's presence beside her made the journey feel less harsh. Each clop of hooves against the ground echoed. In her chest, a steady rhythm that mirrored the slow easing of tension inside her. She glanced at him nervously, unsure how to break the silence, but his calm demeanor encouraged her to relax. The faint glow of lanterns from distant farmhouses lit. The path ahead and the occasional rustle of animals in the brush reminded her that she was entering a world both foreign and comforting. The cowboy spoke softly, recounting small stories of the land and his work on the ranch, his voice steady and even, and she listened intently, finding reassurance in the normalcy and kindness it conveyed with every word. The fear and uncertainty of the station and her abandonment began to melt away, leaving room for curiosity and gratitude. The crisp air carried the scent of pine and earth, and for a moment the loneliness that had weighed so heavily seemed distant. She realized that this man had come not out of obligation, but from a quiet sense of honor and care that offered a warmth no fire could match. Her heart lifted slightly with hope as they approached the ranch, its windows glowing softly through frost-laced panes, the scent of wood smoke drifting into the cold night. The cowboy dismounted, first offering a steady hand for her to climb. Down and assisting with her trunk, the physical support mirrored the emotional reassurance he had provided the entire journey together. They crossed the threshold into the cozy interior, the warmth of the fire and the smell of bread and stew enveloping her, a sense of safety settling in. She looked around, feeling seen and valued for the first time since she had stepped off the train. The night that had begun with fear and loneliness had transformed into a quiet promise of connection, care, and the possibility of belonging, a new chapter, waiting to be written in the glow of the ranch's welcoming hearth, inside the warm ranch. The young woman set down her trunk and felt the tension of the morning slowly leave her. The fire crackled softly, and the scent of fresh bread and stew filled the air, giving her a sense of comfort. She had not known since stepping off the train. The cowboy moved beside her with calm assurance, offering small gestures of help and guidance that made her feel safe. And seen for the first time in days, as they shared a simple Christmas Eve meal, the conversation was soft and gentle, filled with quiet laughter and stories of the ranch and its routines, each word and glance weaving a fragile thread of connection. That eased the memory of abandonment and fear. The evening wore on, and snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in silence. She sipped warm tea and felt the warmth of the room, and the man beside her fill the emptiness she had carried with her. Each moment of care, patience, and kindness built trust, and slowly a sense of belonging took root. She began to imagine a future on the ranch, a life where she could be safe, valued, and perhaps loved. The fear that had pressed on her heart melted into gratitude and hope, and she allowed herself to feel excitement for what was to come. The simple acts of bringing her from the station, offering protection, and sharing a meal had transformed her night of despair into one of comfort and possibility. The glow of the fire reflecting on the wooden walls seemed to mirror the new light in her own heart. The rancher's presence, steady and kind, assured her that she was no longer alone, and the quiet certainty that this Christmas Eve marked the beginning of a new life together settled gently around her, filling the house with warmth, care, and the promise of belonging.